Let's move on to linebackers, the meat of the position. Tackles. Last week we suggested Sion Takitaki, who was on bye, so we'll see how it works out. We were deciding between the Bears linebacker. I threw out Jack Sanborn. He got the role. He got that 76% snap roll. 7 tackles. That's what you want to see. We'll see whether he keeps it going forward. I mean, in a game that, the Bears defense was pretty pitifully demolished. But I expect Jack Sanborn to hold that role. So hopefully you got him last week. If you don't have him, pick him up now. We threw out Jalen Smith, who was on bye. He came on 2 weeks ago. And we also mentioned Jelani Tavai from 2 weeks ago. He was a hit. Big. He dipped in snaps in week 8, so it didn't feel that good then. But now he returned to that role, got it done. But for this week, let's get into some names. Blake Martinez. And I'll tell you, he is going to be a big part of the IDP Guys newsletter that if you want to sign up for, that is in the link of my Twitter bio. Because the man that was left for dead, and rightfully so, has returned like the phoenix rising from the ashes. Now in Las Vegas, he saw over 90% of snaps this past week. He saw a lot of tackles because he saw a lot of snaps, 11 tackles. And Devon Diablo is now on the IR with a forearm injury. And we've seen this before from him, especially in this Patrick Graham system where he was exactly in this role in New York. It doesn't matter whether he's great. He gets a lot of tackles and it works for fantasy. But I don't know if he keeps it long term. He was great as one of the worst Raiders defenders this past week, which rightfully so. We saw what the Raiders got choking a 17-point lead to the Jaguars. Your Jaguars, Brandon. Congrats on that. Congrats on that. But listen, as this is a weak linebacker room for the Raiders. So in the meanwhile, I do think Blake Martinez is going to hold the role for at least one more week, and that means he's going to get a lot of tackles.
Yeah, I mean, I've been holding Blake Martinez, on some of my IDP teams. I didn't play him this last week because, who would have seen this happening? But yeah, he's, that Raiders defense isn't very good. So the linebackers have gotten a lot of tackles, and we've seen that multiple linebackers can have good days on that team with Perryman coming back and Diablo still, getting a good amount of tackles. So, and as we said with the defensive line, it hasn't done much. So a lot is funneled to those linebackers. And even if because even bad linebackers, that actually helps because if they miss, don't get, them right away, then the defense is on the field more tackles to go around. So it will be interesting how long he can, stay in that starting role.
Yeah, I mean, he really did not play well, but again, that linebacker room is not deep. So we will see how it works. Let's go on to number 2, Azeez Al-Shaair. Is it Al-Shaair? I hope it is. Or I hope I'm saying that correctly. That is the San Francisco 49ers linebacker that we have not heard of for 4 weeks now because he has been on the injured reserve. And this 49ers defense has not been bad, but it has missed him sorely. I mean, Dre Greenlaw's been dealing with some injuries as well. They've been asking some other people to step up, but I do expect him to jump right into a very valuable role that saw him break, the triple-digit tackle mark in 2021. He had 102 tackles last year. So with anyone coming off injury, I'm going to exercise some, caution, some patience, because I do think we could be a week or two before we see him jump into the big role that he used to have. But I do expect him to get that back. And we've seen Fred Warner at times not be the tackle machine that, some people want him to be. So someone's going to get that. And I do think Al-Shaair is a guy that will get those plays, and somebody that I do expect him to return this week. I want to play him in 2 weeks, but he is somebody that I want to be holding right now for when he gets that role back.
Yeah, I don't have much to add about that. But yeah, whenever someone's coming back from injury, I'm always hesitant, especially on defense, because you never really know when, they get out there and finally get hit, how much they'll play, if they're going to be a little, fatigued, how many snaps they're going to really get. So I definitely agree with everything you said.
Awesome. That's always good when people agree with me. It makes me feel good, Derek Barnes, this other name, because I feel like we are throwing out a Lions linebacker every 3 weeks on this show, it feels like, Brandon. But listen, before it was Malcolm Rodriguez, the running mate to Alex Anzalone, and Malcolm Rodriguez got hurt this past week, unfortunately. And because of that, we saw Derek Barnes' snaps nearly triple from 18 to 50. He had 12 tackles, 8 of which were assisted. He grabbed a sack, a pass defense, everything you could possibly want. And in the inverse of what you mentioned earlier about the Eagles, of teams not being able to run on them because they have to play the pass, the Lions don't have that issue. The Lions have the issue of teams are going to run on them because they're not a very good football team. I'm sorry, Nate, if you're listening to this, they're not a very good football team. And Derek Barnes is taking full advantage of that. We saw that with 12 tackles this week. That's a high ceiling type of guy. Alex Anzalone has never been impressive to me. So I fully expect him to have a linebacker 2 role with the chance of even jumping above that. So he's I think there's 3 really good linebackers to target this week. It's a strong week for linebackers to, be picking up if you are in need, which is good to know. Any other thoughts about him? And we have one other name I actually am really excited about throwing out, or not as excited, but we'll talk about
it. I will say, the last couple of weeks, the Lions defense has played a lot better. So, and with Bart, they played very well against, a bad Packers offense, but still, it's Aaron Rodgers. And they made a lot of plays, and Barnes seemed to be very involved. So, definitely. We've seen, even players that aren't or we don't consider to be very good, like Anzalone, they can put up monster fantasy days. Yeah. And that's all we really care about fantasy-wise. Not necessarily that they're good, that they just get a lot of the stats.
It's beyond frustrating if you are a Lions fan. I mean, this is a team that had the number 1 scoring offense through 3 weeks. And then the defense couldn't figure it out, so they weren't winning those games. And then the bye week happens, and all of a sudden the offense can't figure it out, and the defense is figuring it out. If they just put it all together, maybe they could actually win more than a few more games. But the pieces are there. I suppose. One other name we'll throw out there, I alluded to at the top of this show, Pete Werner, who went down on Monday night, the backup that I would be chasing. And I go into a little bit more in depth on this week's newsletter. Again, you can check that on the link in my Twitter bio. It is Caden Ellis. Yippee. I'm not super excited about this just because it means that Pete Werner is not out there. But in 57% of snaps this past week, he grabbed 5 tackles. He grabbed a sack. I expect him to get the job, not Zach Bond. And we've seen, what Pete Werner can do with this role. We see Demario Davis drop into coverage or blitz. He doesn't really play that run defensive role that Pete Werner and Caden Ellis will be asked to do. So that's valuable. That's really valuable. And I don't know how long Pete Werner will be out. Obviously, the injury was suffered, not even 12 hours ago. So we'll see as details come out about that. But if it is a long-term injury, Caden Ellis is shaped up to be a very relevant name as we head into the second half of this fantasy season.